What if I told you the future of the world doesn't depend on oil, gold, or even data, but on a handful of dusty, invisible elements buried deep beneath the earth? It sounds absurd, right? Yet these tiny minerals quietly hold the keys to global power. From your smartphone to fighter jets, from electric cars to satellites, everything that defines modern civilization relies on them. And one country has almost total control. For decades, the world's focus was on oil. Wars were fought, economies built, and empires collapsed because of it. But while everyone looked west toward the Middle East, China looked inward, toward the mountains of Inner Mongolia, and discovered its true weapon, rare earth elements. In a few decades, it turned these critical minerals into a tool of geopolitical power so strong that even the U.S. can't ignore it. This isn't just a story about mining or trade. It's about control, dependence, and the quiet shift of global dominance. Because in the 21st century, the race for power isn't fought with tanks or missiles. It's fought with magnets, batteries, and microchips. Stay until the end, because once you understand how China built this empire from the ground up, you'll never look at your phone, your car, or even the global balance of power the same way again. Most people don't realize it, but the modern world quietly runs on a set of elements they've probably never heard of. Rare earth elements, names like neodymium, dysprosium, and terbium, are the invisible gears behind our daily lives. They make our smartphones vibrate, our electric vehicles move, and even our fighter jets fly. Without them, the global supply chain of technology would collapse almost overnight. It's strange to think that something so small could carry so much geopolitical power. These critical minerals are essential for the clean energy transition that everyone's talking about. Wind turbines, for instance, use powerful magnets made from rare earths, and electric car batteries depend on them to function efficiently. But here's the catch. While nations rush towards sustainability, they're unknowingly deepening their technology dependence on a handful of suppliers, especially one giant in the East. It's the kind of quiet vulnerability that doesn't make headlines until it's too late. Imagine if tomorrow your phone stopped working, your car couldn't start, and your military defense systems went offline, all because a single country decided to cut off access to these materials. That's not a sci-fi scenario. It's a real-world possibility. The question is, how did one nation gain so much control over something so vital to modern life? That's where China enters the story, and it didn't happen by accident. Back in the 1970s, China wasn't even a blip on the radar when it came to rare earth mining. Most production came from the United States, particularly from the Mountain Pass mine in California. But while the West was focused on oil, China quietly played the long game. Under Deng Xiaoping's leadership, the government recognized the potential of these critical minerals early on. His words still echo today. The Middle East has oil, China has rare earths. It wasn't just a quote, it was a warning and a strategy rolled into one. China began heavily subsidizing its rare earth industry, offering cheap labor, loose environmental regulations, and government incentives that made it almost impossible for competitors to keep up. Western nations, driven by short-term profits, outsourced production to China, thinking it was just another cost-cutting move. But while they saved dollars, China gained control over the global supply chain. By the late 1990s, Beijing had positioned itself as the world's dominant supplier of rare earth elements, producing more than 80% of global output. This dominance wasn't about luck. It was about long-term vision and a willingness to endure short-term pain for long-term power. While others saw pollution, China saw opportunity. While others closed their minds, China built entire cities around them. It was a geopolitical chess move decades in the making. And as the world became more addicted to technology and clean energy, dependence on China quietly tightened, setting the stage for the next chapter of global tension. By the early 2000s, the U.S., Europe, and Japan realized they'd walked straight into a trap, one built slowly, strategically, and almost invisibly. Entire industries, from electric vehicles to missile systems, depended on China's rare earth elements. When a single nation controls over 80% of the global supply chain for critical minerals, everyone else becomes a customer, not a competitor. It was a quiet form of dominance that didn't need armies or missiles, just control over resources the world couldn't live without. The most striking example came in 2010, when China restricted rare earth exports to Japan after a territorial dispute in the East China Sea. Overnight, prices skyrocketed by more than 700%. That moment sent shockwaves through global markets and made it clear that rare earths weren't just commodities, they were weapons of economic and geopolitical power. It was proof that supply could be used as leverage, the same way oil once was during the 1970s energy crisis. Yet despite the wake-up call, Western nations moved slowly. Reopening mines was expensive, and environmental regulations made it even harder. In the meantime, China's grip only tightened. Think of it like being locked inside a house where your neighbor controls the electricity. You can talk about independence all you want, but until you find a new power source, you're still in the dark. And that growing tension eventually sparked something bigger, a new kind of Cold War, fought not with ideology, but with minerals. The 21st century rivalry between the U.S. and China isn't just about trade deficits or military bases. It's about who controls the future of technology. Rare earth elements have become the new front line in this silent Cold War. Every smartphone chip, every missile guidance system, every electric motor depends on them. The U.S. China rivalry has shifted from ideological to material. Whoever controls these critical minerals controls innovation itself. And right now, that crown still sits firmly on Beijing. Washington has tried to fight back. The Trump administration labeled rare earths as critical to national security, and the Biden administration doubled down with massive funding to rebuild domestic production. Projects like the Mountain Pass mine in California have been revived, and partnerships with allies like Australia's Lynas aim to cut dependence. But even with billions in investment, the U.S. still sends much of its ore to China for processing, a reminder that breaking free from decades of dependence won't happen overnight. Meanwhile, China continues to use its resource dominance as leverage. In 2023, it tightened export controls on gallium and germanium, materials vital for semiconductors, sending another shockwave through the global supply chain. It was a warning shot. If pushed too far, Beijing could cripple industries worldwide without firing a single bullet. This isn't just economic competition anymore, it's strategic survival. And as both nations dig in, another layer of this story begins to surface, one that reveals the human and environmental toll behind China's power. Behind China's dazzling dominance in rare earth mining lies a darker, often ignored truth. Entire regions, especially Balto in Inner Mongolia, have turned into what locals call toxic lakes. The process of extracting rare earth elements leaves behind radioactive waste, heavy metals, and acid runoff that poison soil and water. While the world celebrates clean energy, China's mining towns pay the price. Their skies darkened, crops destroyed, and families forced to relocate. The irony? The Green Revolution rests on black sludge. For the Chinese government, this was a trade-off. Environmental devastation in exchange for geopolitical power. Local communities were sacrificed for a national goal, turning rural areas into industrial wastelands. Reports estimate that producing 1 ton of rare earths can generate up to 2,000 tons of toxic waste. Yet while Western consumers enjoy sleek electric cars and wind-powered homes, few realize the human cost buried in every magnet and motor. The global supply chain hides these scars well. It's a paradox that challenges the moral core of modern progress. Can we call it clean energy if it's built on polluted ground? Environmental regulations in China have tightened in recent years, but illegal mining and waste dumping remain rampant. The race for rare earths shows that technology dependence doesn't just have political risks, ethical ones too. And as the world searches for cleaner, fairer solutions, a new question emerges. Can we truly break free from this cycle of dependence and destruction? After decades of letting China lead the game, the world is finally fighting back. Nations from the U.S. to Australia are investing billions to rebuild their rare earth supply chains. Australia's Lynas Corporation is now one of the only major producers outside China, and the U.S. has restarted the Mountain Pass mine, once abandoned, now reborn as a strategic asset. Japan is pouring funds into recycling technologies, extracting rare earth elements from old electronics. It's a global scramble, not just for resources, but for independence. Still, catching up won't be easy. China isn't standing still. It's expanding its reach through Africa and Southeast Asia, investing in new mining operations to tighten its global grip. Meanwhile, Western countries face high costs, strict regulations, and limited refining capacity. The challenge isn't just mining these critical minerals, it's processing them, a step China continues to dominate. Experts predict it could take over a decade before rivals can match Beijing's efficiency and scale. Until then, the balance of power remains uneven. But there's a glimmer of hope. Advances in recycling and alternative materials could shift the game entirely. Researchers in Europe and the U.S. are exploring substitutes that might reduce dependence on rare earths altogether. If successful, this innovation could redefine the global supply chain, much like how renewable energy disrupted oil. And maybe, just maybe, in this century, wars won't be fought over oil fields anymore, but over the rare earths that power our future. So now you know. The true battleground of the modern era isn't in oil fields or tech hubs, but deep beneath the soil of nations competing for rare earth elements. China played the long game, turning dust into dominance, and the world is only now waking up to the consequences. The global supply chain, clean energy, and even military strength all depend on these critical minerals, and whoever controls them controls the future. But here's the twist. The race isn't over. The U.S., Australia, Japan, and Europe are finally fighting back, investing in innovation, recycling, and new mining frontiers. The question is, will these efforts be enough to break free from decades of dependence? Or will the world simply trade one form of addiction for another? Cleaner, perhaps, but no less controlled. What do you think? Are we heading toward a new Cold War over resources, or can technology set us free from this cycle? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your take. And if you want to keep learning about how global power truly works beneath the surface, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, because this story, it's just getting started.